I arrived at my childhood home carrying a carefully wrapped wedding gift, my heart racing with excitement about my brother Tyler's wedding tomorrow. I found the house strangely quiet, with cars parked outside I didn't recognize. When I burst through the front door calling out about last-minute wedding preparations, my Aunt Dorothy looked up from the couch with a confused expression and said the words that would shatter everything. "Honey, the wedding was last week." The room fell silent as I stared at family photos scattered across the coffee table, beautiful ceremony pictures that didn't include me. Standing there in the entryway of my parents' house, I felt like the floor had disappeared beneath my feet. The carefully wrapped crystal vase in my hand suddenly felt impossibly heavy as I processed what Aunt Dorothy had just said. The wedding was last week. Last week. While I had been planning my outfit, arranging time off from my consulting business, and driving 3 hours across state lines with butterflies in my stomach, my only brother had already gotten married. "What do you mean last week?" I managed to whisper, setting the wedding gift down on the side table with shaking hands. Aunt Dorothy picked up one of the scattered photographs from the coffee table, her face softening with what looked like genuine sympathy. "Oh, sweetheart, look how beautiful it was." I moved closer, my legs feeling unsteady. The photograph showed Tyler in a classic black tuxedo standing next to a woman I barely recognized in an elaborate white gown. They were positioned in front of what looked like the altar at St. Matthew's, the same church where our grandparents had been married 40 years ago. Behind them, I could make out familiar faces smiling broadly. My parents, Robert and Patricia, beamed from the front row. Uncle Larry stood tall in a navy suit I had never seen him wear. Cousin Jessica wore a flowing lavender dress that must have cost more than my monthly car payment. The ceremony was absolutely gorgeous. Aunt Dorothy continued lifting another photograph. This one showed the reception clearly held in my parents' backyard, but the space had been transformed beyond recognition. White string lights hung from every tree branch, elegant round tables dotted the lawn, and a professional photographer had captured candid moments of celebration that excluded me entirely. I picked up another photo with trembling fingers. Tyler was cutting a 3-tier cake alongside his bride, both of them, laughing at something someone had said. The cake was decorated with fresh roses and looked like it belonged in a magazine spread. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment ceremony. This was the wedding of Tyler's dreams, the kind of celebration that required months of planning and coordination. "Who is she?" I asked, pointing to the bride. I realized with growing horror that I didn't even know my brother had been seriously dating anyone, let alone engaged. "That's Stephanie, of course," Aunt Dorothy said, looking puzzled by my question. "Such a lovely girl. She works at the pediatric clinic downtown. Tyler met her at that charity golf tournament back in May." May. That was 7 months ago. 7 months during which my brother had met someone, fallen in love, gotten engaged, and planned an entire wedding without once mentioning any of it to me. I continued shuffling through the photographs, each one feeling like a small knife wound. Here was Tyler dancing with our father at what must have been the father-son dance. There was my mother crying happy tears during what appeared to be emotional wedding vows. Extended family members I hadn't seen since Christmas gathered around tables, raising champagne glasses in celebration. The most devastating photograph showed the entire wedding party posed together after the ceremony. Tyler stood in the center with his new wife surrounded by groomsmen I recognized as his college friends, and bridesmaids who must have been Stephanie's sorority sisters. My parents flanked the happy couple, my father's arm around Tyler's shoulders, while my mother held Stephanie's bouquet. Everyone looked radiant, complete, perfectly happy. I was nowhere to be found. "How many people were there?" I heard myself asking. "Oh, about 60 for the ceremony," Aunt Dorothy replied cheerfully. "Then closer to 80 for the reception. Your mother did such a beautiful job with the planning. She spent weeks coordinating with the caterers and the florist. The whole backyard looked like something from a fairy tale. Weeks of planning, caterers, florists, professional photography. This wasn't a simple courthouse ceremony or an intimate family gathering that might have been arranged quickly. This was a full-scale wedding celebration that had required extensive organization and coordination. Just then, I heard familiar voices coming from the kitchen. The sound of my parents' laughter drifted through the house, casual and relaxed, as if this were any ordinary Saturday afternoon. They emerged through the kitchen doorway, my mother Patricia holding a coffee mug with "World's Best Mom" printed on the side, my father Robert carrying what looked like leftover wedding cake on a small plate. "Say, Candace," my mother said, her tone cheerful but somehow distant. "What a nice surprise. We weren't expecting you today." The casual nature of her greeting felt like a slap across the face. After discovering that I had missed my own brother's wedding, my mother was treating my presence like an unexpected but mildly pleasant visit from a neighbor. "Expecting me?" I repeated, my voice rising despite my attempts to stay calm. "I'm here for Tyler's wedding, the wedding that was supposed to be tomorrow." My parents exchanged a look that I couldn't quite interpret. It wasn't surprise or confusion. It was something closer to mild annoyance, mixed with resignation, like parents discovering their child had forgotten to complete a homework assignment. "Oh, honey," Patricia sighed, setting down her coffee mug on the side table next to my abandoned wedding gift. "The wedding was beautiful. Tyler looked so handsome in his tuxedo." Before I could respond to this completely inadequate explanation, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Tyler appeared at the top of the staircase wearing pajama pants and an old college t-shirt, his hair sticking up in several directions. He looked like he had just woken up from a nap, completely relaxed and oblivious to the emotional bomb that had just exploded in his sister's chest. "Candace," he called down, rubbing his eyes. "What are you doing here?" The question hit me like a physical blow. My own brother, looking down at me from the stairs where we had raced as children, was asking what I was doing in our family home on what I had believed was the day before his wedding. "I'm here for your wedding," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Your wedding that was supposed to be tomorrow." Tyler descended the stairs slowly, and as he got closer, I could see something in his expression that made my stomach drop even further. It wasn't confusion or regret or embarrassment about a miscommunication. It was a look of mild surprise mixed with what almost seemed like amusement. When he reached the bottom of the stairs, Tyler glanced around at the assembled family members before focusing on me with a slight shrug of his shoulders. "Didn't we tell you?" he asked, his tone so casual it felt cruel. "The wedding was last Saturday. It was amazing." The words hung in the air like smoke from a fire, acrid and suffocating. "Didn't we tell you?" As if forgetting to mention a wedding was the same as forgetting to mention a change in dinner plans. As if the most important day in my brother's life was such a minor detail that its timing might have simply slipped everyone's mind. I looked around the room at the faces of my family members. Aunt Dorothy appeared genuinely sympathetic, but also uncomfortable, as if she were witnessing something she had no desire to be part of. My parents maintained expressions of mild concern that seemed completely disproportionate to the magnitude of what had just been revealed. Tyler looked like someone who had been asked to explain why he had chosen regular milk instead of almond milk for his cereal. None of them seemed to understand that my world had just completely collapsed. The silence in the room stretched on until I felt like I might scream just to break it. Everyone was looking at me with expressions that ranged from mild sympathy to outright confusion, as if my emotional reaction to missing my brother's wedding was somehow disproportionate or unreasonable. "Oh, you have to be kidding me." I finally managed, my voice cracking despite my efforts to maintain composure. "You all planned and executed an entire wedding without telling me? How is that even possible?" "We sent you everything," Patricia said quickly, reaching for her purse on the side table. "All the details were in the family group chat. The venue changed the time adjustments, the dress code updates. You must have seen all the messages. She pulled out her phone with the confidence of someone who was about to prove her point definitively. Her fingers moved across the screen with practiced efficiency as she navigated to what appeared to be a text message thread. "Look, here it is," she said, turning the phone toward me. "Tyler's big day. See, you're listed right there as one of the participants." I stared at the screen, reading the group chat name and seeing my own name listed among the members: Patricia, Robert, Tyler, Stephanie, Aunt Dorothy, Uncle Larry, cousin Jessica, and Candace. The thread showed dozens upon dozens of messages stretching back several months. I could see timestamps indicating conversations that had happened during my normal business hours in the evenings, when I would have been available, and on weekends when I definitely would have responded. "I never received any of these messages," I said, pulling out my own phone with hands that were still shaking. "Look, I'll show you my message history." I opened my text messaging app and searched for any group conversations involving my family members. There was a thread with just Tyler from months ago where we had discussed his job promotion. Another individual conversation with my mother about a recipe she had wanted to share. A few scattered messages with my father about investment advice he had requested. But there was absolutely no group chat called Tyler's Big Day anywhere in my message history. "That's impossible," Robert said, moving closer to look at my phone screen. "We've been planning this thing for months. You've been getting all the updates." I held my phone next to Patricia's, comparing the two screens. Her phone showed the active group chat with my name clearly listed as a participant and a massive thread of messages about wedding planning. My phone showed absolutely nothing. "Look at the phone numbers," I said, pointing to the small print underneath each name in the group chat. "What number do you have listed for me?" Patricia squinted at her screen, reading the digits under my name in the group chat. As she recited the number, my heart sank even further. The number was almost identical to my actual phone number, but the last digit was wrong. Instead of ending in 7, their group chat was sending messages to a number ending in 9. "That's not my number," I said quietly. "My number ends in 7, not 9. The family gathered around to examine both phones, and the evidence was undeniable. For months, they had been including someone else's phone number in their wedding planning conversations while believing they were keeping me informed. "Well, that explains everything," Tyler said with obvious relief in his voice. "It was just a wrong number in the group chat. Mystery solved." But as I looked more closely at Patricia's phone, something didn't add up. The contact information showed my name, but when I asked her to show me where she had originally entered my phone number, she navigated to her regular contacts list. There, under my name, was my correct phone number ending in 7. "Mom," I said slowly, "if you have my correct number saved in your regular contacts, how did the wrong number end up in the group chat?" Patricia's face went slightly pale as she realized what I was asking. For the group chat to have the wrong number, someone would have had to manually enter it incorrectly when creating the conversation thread. It wasn't a case of outdated contact information or an old phone number that needed updating. "I don't understand," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Tyler set up the group chat. Maybe he made a typo." All eyes turned to Tyler, who suddenly looked less confident and more defensive than he had moments before. "It was probably just a mistake when I was adding everyone," he said, but he wouldn't meet my eyes. "You know how easy it is to hit the wrong number when you're typing fast." Something about his explanation felt wrong, but before I could press further, I heard footsteps coming down the stairs. A young woman with shoulder-length blonde hair and wearing a Stanford University sweatshirt appeared at the bottom of the staircase. This had to be Stephanie Tyler's new wife, whom I was meeting for the very first time. "Oh," she said, looking around at the tense scene in the living room. "I didn't realize we had company." "Stephanie," Tyler said quickly, "this is my sister Candace. Remember, I told you about her—" Stephanie's face brightened with recognition, but what she said next made my blood run cold. Of course, you're the one who couldn't make it to the wedding because you were too busy with work. She walked over and extended her hand for a handshake. Tyler explained how disappointed everyone was, but we totally understood that your business commitments had to come first. I stood there holding her hand, staring into the face of my new sister-in-law who had been fed a complete lie about my absence from their wedding. According to the story she had been told, I had chosen not to attend my brother's wedding because of work obligations. The family hadn't just failed to invite me. They had created an elaborate narrative explaining my absence that painted me as the family member who prioritized career over relationships. My business commitments, I repeated slowly. Tyler mentioned that you're always traveling for work and rarely have time for family events. Stephanie continued innocently, but he said you sent a beautiful card and were really sorry to miss everything. I turned to look at Tyler, who was now avoiding eye contact entirely. Not only had I not sent a card, but I had never been given the opportunity to make any choice about attending the wedding. Yet somehow, my family had explained my absence to Tyler's new wife as a matter of misplaced priorities rather than failed communication. What exactly did Tyler tell you about why I wasn't at the wedding? I asked Stephanie directly. Stephanie glanced at Tyler uncertainly, clearly sensing that she had walked into something complicated. Just that you've been really focused on growing your consulting business, she said carefully, and that family events are sometimes hard for you to prioritize because of client demands and travel schedules. The portrait being painted was of a cold, career-obsessed sister who had chosen professional success over celebrating her brother's most important life milestone. It was a narrative that conveniently explained my absence while absolving the family of any responsibility for ensuring I knew about the wedding in the first place. So everyone just accepted that I would miss Tyler's wedding because of work. I asked the room in general. We were disappointed, Robert said defensively, but we understood that your business is important to you. More important than family? Patricia added with a slight edge to her voice. And there it was. The real issue wasn't the wrong phone number in the group chat or the miscommunication about wedding dates. The real issue was that my family had decided I valued my career more than my relationships with them, and they had used that assumption to justify excluding me from the most significant family celebration in years. They hadn't just failed to invite me to Tyler's wedding. They had rewritten the entire story to make my absence my fault. As I stood there processing the layers of deception and manipulation I had just uncovered, a terrible thought began forming in the back of my mind. If my family had been this casual about excluding me from Tyler's wedding while creating explanations for my absence, what other events had I missed without knowing they were happening? "Excuse me for a minute," I said, pulling out my phone and opening my social media apps. "I need to check something." I started with Instagram, scrolling back through my mother's posts from the past year. Patricia wasn't a heavy social media user, but she occasionally posted photos of family gatherings and special occasions. What I found made my stomach drop even further. 3 months ago, there was a post showing a beautifully decorated dining room with the caption, "Celebrating another year around the sun, grateful for family and another blessed birthday." The photo showed my parents' dining table set for 8 people with an elaborate cake in the center and what appeared to be professionally wrapped gifts stacked on the sideboard. The post had dozens of likes and comments from extended family members wishing Patricia a happy birthday. My mother's birthday was in August. I had sent her a card and called to wish her well, but she had mentioned nothing about a celebration or party. When I had asked about her plans, she had said she was keeping things low-key this year and probably just having dinner with your father. I scrolled further back and found another post from 5 months ago. This one showed my father in a golf shirt and khakis holding what appeared to be a retirement gift while surrounded by family members in my parents' backyard. The caption read, "Celebrating 42 years of hard work and dedication. Ready for the next chapter." Again, dozens of congratulatory comments from people I recognized as family friends and extended relatives. My father had retired in June. When I had called to congratulate him, he had mentioned that he was planning a quiet transition and didn't want any fuss or celebrations. He had specifically told me not to make the 3-hour drive because they weren't doing anything special to mark the occasion. I continued scrolling with growing horror. Here was a post from Tyler's Instagram showing what appeared to be an engagement party at a local country club. Tyler and Stephanie were surrounded by family members holding up champagne glasses in celebration. The timestamp indicated this had happened 4 months ago. Another post from cousin Jessica showed a group photo at what looked like a family reunion barbecue. The caption mentioned how wonderful it was to see everyone together and how much fun the kids had playing in the backyard. That event had apparently happened 6 weeks ago. Post after post revealed a rich family social life that had been happening without me for months. Birthday celebrations, retirement parties, engagement announcements, family barbecues, holiday gatherings. My family had been maintaining an active schedule of shared experiences and special occasions while I remained completely unaware of any of it. How many family events have I missed? I asked, holding up my phone to show the Instagram posts. The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. Aunt Dorothy, who had been quietly observing the increasingly tense conversation, finally spoke up. "Well, we've gotten quite good at coordinating schedules," she said carefully. "It's been nice that everyone has been so available lately." "Available," I repeated. "Everyone except me." "You've been so busy building your business," Patricia said defensively. "We didn't want to burden you with every little family gathering." "Burden me with family gatherings," I said, my voice rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. "You didn't want to burden me with my own father's retirement party." "You said yourself that work was your priority right now," Robert interjected. "We were being considerate of your time." I tried to remember when I had ever told my family that work was my priority over spending time with them. Yes, I had been focused on building my consulting business over the past few years. I had worked long hours, traveled for clients, and sometimes had to decline last-minute social invitations. But I had never said that my career was more important than my relationships with family members. "When did I say that work was my priority over family?" I asked. Tyler and my parents exchanged glances again, that same look of mild annoyance I had noticed earlier. "It's not what you said," Tyler replied. "It's how you act. When's the last time you called just to chat without needing something? When's the last time you visited without it being a holiday or a special occasion?" The accusation stung because it contained elements of truth that were being weaponized against me. Building a consulting business from scratch had required enormous amounts of time and energy. I had been focused and driven and sometimes unavailable for casual socializing, but I had never intended to communicate that my family relationships were unimportant to me. "So instead of talking to me about feeling disconnected, you all decided to just start excluding me from family events?" I asked. "We weren't excluding you," Patricia said quickly. "We were being respectful of your schedule by not telling me about events, so I couldn't even make the choice to attend. By not pressuring you to choose between your business and your family," Robert corrected. The logic was circular and maddening. My family had decided that I was too busy to attend family events, so they had stopped inviting me to family events, which confirmed their belief that I wasn't interested in participating in family events. They had created a self-fulfilling prophecy that justified excluding me while making it appear to be my choice. What if I had wanted to come to any of these events? I asked. What if I would have rearranged my schedule or changed my plans? "Would you have?" Tyler asked pointedly. The question hung in the air, and I realized that my family had been making assumptions about my choices without ever giving me the opportunity to make those choices. They had decided what my priorities were and had acted accordingly, never testing whether their assumptions were accurate. "You'll never know," I said quietly, "because you never asked." Stephanie, who had been listening to this exchange with growing discomfort, finally spoke up. Maybe I should go upstairs, she said hesitantly. This seems like family business. No, I said quickly. Stay. You should hear this too, since you're part of this family now. I turned back to my parents and brother with a feeling of terrible clarity washing over me. You've all been having family relationships with each other while systematically excluding me, I continued. Then, you've been telling each other and telling yourselves that the exclusion is my fault because I'm too focused on work to care about family. It's a perfect system because it allows you to maintain family connections without having to deal with me while making me the bad guy for prioritizing my career. The room fell silent as everyone processed what I had just said. I could see in their faces that my assessment had hit close to home, but I could also see defensiveness and resistance to acknowledging what they had been doing. That's not fair, Patricia said finally. We love you, and we want you to be part of family events, but we can't force you to participate if you're always too busy. You can't force me to participate in events I don't know are happening, I shot back. Well, maybe if you stayed in better touch, you would know what was going on with the family, Tyler said with obvious frustration. And there was the heart of it. My family had created a catch-22 situation where I was expected to maintain close enough contact to intuitively know about events I wasn't being told about while simultaneously being labeled as too career-focused to care about family relationships. Looking around the room at the faces of my family members, I realized that this pattern had been developing for years without my awareness. While I had been building my business and assuming that I remained a valued part of the family structure, my relatives had been gradually writing me out of their shared experiences while maintaining the fiction that my absence was voluntary. What made it even worse was the realization that they genuinely seemed to believe their own narrative about my priorities and availability. The tension in the room was becoming unbearable when Robert suddenly shifted uncomfortably and cleared his throat. Well, regardless of the misunderstandings about events, he said, his tone suggesting he wanted to change the subject, we really appreciate everything you do for the family, Candace. Your contributions have meant the world to us. Something about the way he said contributions made my antenna go up. I had been sending my parents $2,000 every month for the past 3 years to help with what I understood to be basic living expenses as they approached retirement age. The arrangement had started when my father mentioned concerns about rising property taxes and medical insurance costs. What do you mean by contributions? I asked carefully. Patricia and Robert exchanged another one of their meaningful looks, and I was beginning to recognize that these glances usually preceded revelations I wasn't going to like. The monthly support you provide, Patricia said as if it should be obvious. It's been such a blessing. I thought that money was helping with your basic expenses, I said slowly. Property taxes, insurance premiums, medical bills. Well, yes, Robert agreed, among other things. What other thing? The silence that followed was loaded with discomfort. Tyler looked confused, as if he wasn't entirely sure what financial arrangement we were discussing. Stephanie appeared increasingly uncomfortable with being present for what was clearly a complex family conversation. Aunt Dorothy had started studying her fingernails with intense concentration. The house improvements, Patricia finally admitted quietly. The kitchen renovation, the new flooring, the backyard landscaping. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. House improvements? Nothing extravagant, Robert said quickly. Just updates that needed to be done anyway. The kitchen was from 1985, and the hardwood floors were completely worn out. Let me make sure I understand this correctly, I said, my voice getting dangerously quiet. I've been sending you $2,000 every month because I thought you needed help with basic living expenses, but you've actually been using that money for home renovations. The house needed work, Patricia said defensively, and we couldn't afford to do the improvements on just your father's pension. I walked over to the window that looked out on my parents' backyard, really seeing it for the first time since I had arrived. The space had been completely transformed since my last visit. Professional landscaping had replaced the basic lawn and flower beds I remembered from childhood. Mature trees that must have cost thousands of dollars provided shade over a stone patio that definitely hadn't existed the last time I was here. String lights were still hanging from previous celebrations, and I could see the outline of what appeared to be a permanent outdoor kitchen area. "This is where Tyler's wedding reception was held," I said, not really asking a question. "Yes," Tyler said with obvious pride. "Mom and Dad did an amazing job with the renovations. The whole backyard was perfect for the ceremony and reception." I turned around to face my family, pieces of a bigger picture starting to fall into place. "So my money paid for the renovations that made it possible to host Tyler's wedding here? Your contributions were just part of the overall household budget," Robert said evasively. "That's not what I'm asking." My voice was getting louder despite my attempts to control it. "Did my monthly payments directly fund the home improvements that made Tyler's wedding reception possible?" The admission came in the form of continued silence and guilty expressions rather than actual words. I walked back into the living room and picked up some of the wedding photos that were still scattered on the coffee table. Looking at them with new eyes, I could see evidence of significant investment. The backyard looked like something from a home and garden magazine. The indoor spaces visible in some of the photos showed high-end finishes and updated fixtures that represented serious renovation spending. "How much did all of this cost?" I asked. "The renovations?" Patricia looked panicked. "Well, we got some good deals and your father did a lot of the labor himself." "How much?" "Maybe $35,000 total," Robert finally admitted, "over the past 2 years. I did quick math in my head. $2,000 per month for 3 years equaled $72,000. The renovations had cost $35,000. That left $37,000 unaccounted for. What happened to the other $37,000? "Other money?" Patricia asked innocently. "I've sent you $72,000 over 3 years. You spent $35,000 on renovations. Where's the remaining $37,000? Tyler was staring at our parents with an expression that suggested this was news to him as well. Stephanie looked like she wanted to disappear entirely. "We've had other expenses," Robert said vaguely. "Your mother's medical bills, car repairs, general household costs." "What medical bills?" I asked sharply. Both of my parents had excellent health insurance through my father's former employer. "Well, the insurance doesn't cover everything," Patricia said defensively. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, scrolling back through 3 years of monthly transfers to my parents' account. "I have records of every payment I've sent you," I said. $2,000 on the 15th of every month for 36 months. $72,000 total. I want to know exactly how that money was spent. The panic on my parents' faces was becoming more obvious. Tyler was looking back and forth between our parents and me as if he were watching a tennis match. "We don't have to account to you for every dollar," Robert said with a tone that was probably meant to sound authoritative but came across as defensive. "Actually, you do," I said quietly, "because I've been sending that money under the impression that you needed help with basic living expenses. If you've been using it for optional home improvements and discretionary spending, that changes everything." "It's not like we've been frivolous with it," Patricia protested. "Hosting an 80-person wedding reception isn't frivolous," I asked. "That was a special occasion," she said. "A special occasion that I paid for but wasn't invited to." The brutal reality of the situation was becoming crystal clear. For 3 years, I had been unknowingly subsidizing my family's lifestyle improvements and discretionary spending while being systematically excluded from the benefits of that investment. My money had transformed their home into a beautiful entertainment space that had hosted celebrations I wasn't told about. Tyler finally spoke up, his voice uncertain. I didn't know Candace was paying for the house renovations, he said to our parents. You told me you had saved up for those projects. We didn't lie, Robert said quickly. We did save up for them. Candace's contributions just made it possible for us to save. The wordplay was infuriating. They had used my financial support to free up their own income for luxury improvements, while allowing Tyler to believe that their comfortable lifestyle was the result of their own careful financial planning. So when you were planning Tyler's wedding, I said slowly, you knew that my money had paid for the renovations that made the backyard reception possible. Patricia's face crumpled slightly. We thought you understood that your contributions were going toward general household improvements. I thought my contributions were keeping you from losing your house, I said. Well, that too, Robert added weakly. Stephanie finally couldn't contain herself any longer. Tyler, she said, touching his arm gently, maybe we should talk privately about some of this. Tyler looked at his new wife with confusion and growing concern. It was clear that the financial dynamics of his family were more complicated than he had realized, and that his wedding celebration had been enabled by money from the sister who hadn't been invited to attend. The room fell into uncomfortable silence as everyone processed the implications of what had just been revealed. I had been financially supporting a family that had simultaneously been excluding me from their shared experiences, using my money to create spaces and opportunities for celebrations that didn't include me. And the worst part was that they had convinced themselves and tried to convince Tyler and Stephanie that my absence from these events was voluntary and the result of my own misplaced priorities. Looking around the room at the faces of my family members, I realized that I had stumbled into something much bigger and more systematic than a simple miscommunication about a wedding date. I had uncovered a pattern of financial exploitation disguised as family support, combined with emotional manipulation disguised as respect for my career priorities. The silence in the room was broken by Stephanie, who seemed to be struggling with something she wanted to say. Can I ask you something, Candace? She said hesitantly. Tyler mentioned that you have a little consulting business. What kind of work do you do? The phrase little consulting business hit me like ice water. I turned to stare at Tyler, who suddenly looked very uncomfortable. Little consulting business, I repeated. Well, Stephanie continued, clearly unaware that she was stepping into dangerous territory. Tyler explained that you're trying to get something started with computers or technology. He said it's been really challenging and that you're still figuring out if it's going to work out. I felt my face getting hot. Tyler told you that my business might not work out. Wait, she mentioned that startup businesses are really risky, Stephanie said, looking confused by my reaction, and that you've been struggling to find your footing in the consulting world. I turned to face Tyler directly. Is that really how you've been describing my work to your wife? Tyler shifted uncomfortably. I mean, consulting is competitive. I was just being realistic about the challenges. Terrence Tyler, I said very quietly, my consulting firm generated $312,000 in revenue last year. I have 4 full-time employees and clients in 16 states. What exactly is struggling about that? The color drained from Tyler's face. Stephanie's mouth fell open slightly. My parents suddenly became very interested in studying the family photos on the coffee table. 300,000, Stephanie whispered. 312,000, I repeated. This year we're on track for 400,000, and I'm looking at expanding into federal government contracts. Tyler looked like he wanted to disappear. I didn't know the exact numbers. You didn't know because you never asked, I said. But that didn't stop you from telling your wife that my business was some kind of hobby experiment that might fail. Stephanie turned to look at Tyler with an expression I couldn't quite read. You told me she was just getting started and that she wasn't making much money yet. I assumed Tyler started, but I cut him off. You assumed wrong. And instead of finding out the facts, you created a story about my professional life that made it sound like I was playing around with computers instead of running a legitimate business. Just then, the front door opened and Uncle Larry walked in without knocking the way family members do when they're completely comfortable in someone's home. "Hey everyone," he called out cheerfully. "Just stopped by to return your hedge trimmers, Robert." He noticed me standing in the living room and his face lit up with what appeared to be genuine surprise. Candace. What a nice surprise. How's that little computer thing going? Still trying to get your business off the ground?" The phrase, little computer thing, was like gasoline thrown on a fire. "Uncle Larry," I said with forced calm, "what exactly do you think I do for work?" "Well," he said, looking around the room uncertainly, "your parents mentioned you're trying to start some kind of technology business, playing around with websites and such." "Playing around with websites," I repeated. "They said you're working really hard at it, but that it's been tough to get clients," he continued. "Something about computer consulting not being as easy as you thought it would be." I looked at my parents, who were now actively avoiding eye contact with everyone in the room. I said, "What exactly have you been telling people about my work?" Patricia fidgeted with her coffee mug. "We just explained that you're working in technology consulting." "And what do you say about how successful that consulting is?" "Well, we don't really know the details of your business finances," she said defensively. "You know that I send you $2,000 every month," I pointed out. "Did it occur to you that someone who's struggling to get clients probably wouldn't be able to afford that?" Uncle Larry was looking increasingly uncomfortable as he realized he had walked into a family argument. "Maybe I should come back later," he said. "No, please stay," I said. "I'm curious to know what other family members have been told about my career." I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my business website. "Uncle Larry, would you like to see what I actually do for work?" I handed him my phone showing the homepage of Brennan Business Solutions, complete with client testimonials, case studies, and a professional photo of me in business attire standing in front of a conference room full of executives. Uncle Larry squinted at the screen, reading the description of services and client list. His eyebrows went up higher and higher as he scrolled through the content. "This says you work with Fortune 500 companies," he said with obvious surprise. 17 of them as of last quarter, I confirmed. "And you have offices in Chicago and Atlanta." "Virtual offices, but yes. I also have meeting spaces in both cities for client presentations." Uncle Larry handed my phone back to me and turned to look at Robert and Patricia with confusion. "You told me she was having trouble getting her consulting business started," he said. "This looks like she's already pretty successful." "We didn't want to make assumptions," Patricia said weakly. "You didn't want to make assumptions about success," I said, "but you were comfortable making assumptions about failure." The pattern was becoming clear. My family had been systematically downplaying my professional achievements to anyone who would listen. They had created a narrative in which my career was a risky experiment rather than an established success, which helped justify their belief that I was too focused on unstable work priorities to make time for family relationships. "How many other people have you told that my business is struggling?" I asked. "We don't gossip about your personal affairs," Robert said stiffly. "Telling people that my business might fail isn't gossiping about my personal affairs." "We were just being realistic about the challenges of entrepreneurship," he said. "Based on what information?" I demanded. "When was the last time any of you asked me a single question about how my business was actually doing?" The silence that followed was telling. "You've been describing my work as a hobby that might not succeed," I continued, "while accepting $2,000 every month from that same hobby. Did it occur to any of you that those two things don't add up?" Stephanie was staring at Tyler with an expression that was becoming increasingly disappointed. "Tyler," she said quietly, "you told me that Candace was stressed about money, and that's why she couldn't take time away from work for family events." "I thought she was..." Tyler said defensively. How was I supposed to know she was making that much money? You could have asked her, Stephanie said pointedly. Or, I added, you could have wondered how someone who's struggling financially could afford to send your parents $24,000 per year. Uncle Larry let out a low whistle. $24,000 a year. Every year for the past 3 years, I confirmed. But apparently, my business is just a little computer hobby that might not work out. The contradiction was impossible to ignore. My family had been accepting substantial financial support from my business, while simultaneously telling anyone who would listen that my business was unstable and unsuccessful. They had created a story that allowed them to minimize my achievements while benefiting from the results of those achievements. Oh, why? I asked quietly. Why would you tell people that my business is struggling when you know I'm successful enough to support your household financially? Patricia finally looked up from her coffee mug with tears in her eyes. Because we're proud of Tyler's steady job at the bank, she said quietly, and your father worked for the same company for 42 years. We understand that kind of success. And my kind of success you don't understand. Your kind of success feels unstable to us, Robert admitted. All that traveling and working with different clients and never knowing what next month will bring. So you decided to describe it to people as failure instead of success. We decided to be cautious about celebrating something that might not last, Patricia said. The logic was maddening. My parents were so uncomfortable with entrepreneurial success that they preferred to describe it as potential failure, even while depending on it financially. They were more comfortable accepting money from a business they described as struggling than acknowledging that their daughter had built something genuinely successful. Do you realize, I said slowly, that by telling people my business is struggling, you're undermining my professional reputation in our community? The thought clearly hadn't occurred to any of them. People talk to each other, I continued. When Uncle Larry mentions to his neighbors that his niece is having trouble getting her consulting business off the ground, and those neighbors happen to know business owners who might need consulting services, what do you think happens to my potential referral opportunities? Uncle Larry looked stricken. I had no idea. I thought I was being supportive by acknowledging how hard you're working. You were being supportive by repeating false information my parents gave you about my career. I turned back to my parents with growing fury. You've been sabotaging my professional reputation while taking my money, I said. And you've been doing it to protect your own comfort with Tyler's more traditional career path. That's not fair, Tyler protested. Nobody asked you to send them money. You're right, I agreed. Nobody asked me. I offered because I thought my parents needed help with basic living expenses. I didn't realize I was subsidizing home renovations for family celebrations I wasn't invited to, while you all told the community that my business was failing. The room fell silent again as everyone absorbed the full scope of what had been revealed. My family had been systematically undermining my professional reputation, excluding me from family celebrations, and using my financial contributions to improve their own lifestyle, all while convincing themselves that I was too career-obsessed to care about family relationships. And they had done it so thoroughly that Tyler's new wife believed she was marrying into a family where the sister was an unsuccessful entrepreneur who couldn't prioritize relationships. The emotional weight of everything I had discovered was becoming overwhelming, but I could see that my family still didn't understand the depth of what they had done. Patricia was wiping away tears, but her expression suggested she felt more attacked than genuinely sorry. I don't understand why you're making us out to be the bad guys, she said with a trembling voice. We've always supported you, even when you chose paths that worried us. Chose paths that worried you, I repeated. You were always different, Candace. She continued, her voice getting stronger as she seemed to find her footing in familiar territory. Even as a child, you preferred being alone with books instead of playing with other kids. You chose academic camps over family vacations. You left for college 2 years early because you couldn't wait to get away from home. The words hit me like physical blows, each on a distorted interpretation of childhood memories I held dear. I loved reading, I said quietly. That didn't mean I preferred being alone. You never wanted to participate in family game nights, Robert added, apparently deciding to support Patricia's line of argument. You always had homework or projects that were more important than spending time with us. I was accelerated in school, I said, my voice rising, despite my efforts to stay calm. I had advanced coursework that required extra study time. You chose to be accelerated, Patricia pointed out. You chose the harder path instead of enjoying a normal childhood with your family. Tyler nodded in agreement. You were always trying to prove how smart you were, making the rest of us feel stupid for watching television or wanting to relax on weekends. I stared at my brother, remembering a completely different version of our childhood. I remembered him watching cartoons while I did homework at the kitchen table. I remembered asking if he wanted help with his math problems and him telling me to leave him alone. I remembered family dinners where I tried to share what I was learning in advanced classes and being told that not everything had to be a teaching moment. I never tried to make anyone feel stupid, I said. I tried to share what I was excited about learning. You were excited about things nobody else cared about, Tyler replied. Quantum physics and computer programming and business strategy. Normal families don't discuss derivatives over dinner. So because I was interested in academic subjects, that meant I didn't value family. It meant you were more comfortable with books than with people, Patricia said gently, as if she were explaining something obvious. Even your teachers mentioned how you seemed to relate better to adults than to children your own age. I felt like I was being gaslighted about my own childhood experiences. Yes, I had been intellectually curious and academically oriented. Yes, I had preferred reading to watching television and had found adults more interesting conversationalists than most kids my age. But my family had interpreted these natural personality traits as rejection of family connections, rather than simply being different from them. When you left for college at 16, Robert continued, we knew you needed to find your own path. We respected that you needed intellectual challenges we couldn't provide. I left for college at 16 because I had already completed high school level coursework, I said, but I called home twice a week and came back for every holiday and break. You came back, but you never really came home, Patricia said with a sad smile. You were always reading research papers or working on projects, always focused on the next goal instead of enjoying the moment with family. The rewrite of history was so thorough and so wrong that I didn't know how to respond. They had taken my natural personality traits and academic gifts and interpreted them as character flaws that justified treating me as less important than Tyler. So because I was academically inclined, I said slowly, you decided I didn't need family connection the way Tyler did. We decided you were strong enough to handle independence, Robert said, as if he were paying me a compliment. Tyler always needed more family support and guidance. Tyler needed more attention, I corrected. Tyler appreciated family traditions in ways you never seemed to, Patricia said defensively. I thought about all the family traditions I had loved as a child, reading Christmas stories aloud on Christmas Eve, helping my mother bake cookies for school functions, camping trips where my father taught me to identify constellations, road trips where I navigated using paper maps and calculated travel times. All of those memories involved me participating enthusiastically in family activities. But apparently, my family remembered those experiences differently. They remembered my navigation skills as showing off. They remembered my enthusiasm for learning as preferring books to people. They had reframed every positive childhood memory I had into evidence that I was somehow deficient in family loyalty. What you're describing, I said carefully, sounds like a child who was intellectually gifted but still wanted to be part of the family. What I'm hearing is that you interpreted those gifts as a rejection of family values. We interpreted those gifts as signs that you would be fine without as much family support as Tyler needed, Patricia corrected. Aunt Dorothy, who had been listening to this exchange with growing discomfort, finally spoke up. Patricia, she said gently, Candace was 8 years old when she started asking if she could help plan your birthday parties. She used to make detailed spreadsheets of gift ideas for everyone in the family. She did love organizing things, Patricia agreed with a nostalgic smile, always making lists and charts. Because she wanted to contribute to family celebrations, Aunt Dorothy continued pointedly, not because she was trying to show off how smart she was. The comment hung in the air as everyone processed what Aunt Dorothy had just revealed. My childhood, organizational skills, and attention to detail hadn't been attempts to demonstrate intellectual superiority. They had been expressions of love and desire to make family experiences special. I made those spreadsheets because I wanted everyone to have perfect birthdays and holidays, I said quietly. I wanted to help make sure family celebrations were everything they could be. You always did go overboard with planning, Tyler said with what sounded like fond exasperation. I went overboard because I cared about making things special for the people I loved, I replied. The silence that followed was different from the previous uncomfortable silences. This one felt heavier, weighted with the possibility that my family was beginning to understand how thoroughly they had misinterpreted my childhood behavior. Maybe, Stephanie said very quietly, Candace wasn't trying to distance herself from family. Maybe she was trying to contribute to family in the ways that felt natural to her. Tyler looked at his new wife with surprise, as if the thought had never occurred to him. I always assumed she thought our family stuff was beneath her intelligence level, he admitted. What if she was trying to use her intelligence to make family stuff better, Stephanie suggested. I felt tears starting to form in my eyes as someone finally articulated what I had been trying to communicate my entire childhood. I loved our family, I said, my voice breaking slightly. I loved everything about being part of this family. I just expressed that love differently than Tyler did. But you left, Patricia said, as if that were the ultimate proof of her interpretation. You moved 3 hours away as soon as you could. I moved 3 hours away for a job opportunity, I corrected, and I've been sending you $2,000 every month since then to make sure you were financially secure. How is that evidence that I don't care about family? The question seemed to genuinely confuse my parents, as if they had never considered the contradiction between my supposed rejection of family and my consistent financial support. We thought you sent money because you felt guilty about being too busy to visit more often, Robert said uncertainly. I sent money because I love you and wanted to make sure you were comfortable in your retirement year, I replied, just like I made spreadsheets for your birthday parties because I wanted those celebrations to be perfect. The pattern was becoming clear. My family had spent decades interpreting my expressions of love as evidence that I didn't love them enough. They had taken my desire to contribute and improve family experiences as proof that I thought family experiences weren't good enough for me. And they had used that misinterpretation to justify treating me as less important than Tyler while accepting the financial benefits of the career success they claimed to view as a rejection of family values. While my immediate family was processing the revelations about childhood misinterpretations, I noticed Uncle Larry pulling out his phone and typing what appeared to be a text message. "Who are you texting?" I asked. "Just letting Jessica know you're here," he said casually. "She'll be excited to see you." "Jessica knows I'm here," I asked with growing alarm. "Well, she will now," Uncle Larry replied, still typing. "I'm telling her about your business success, too. She'll be thrilled to hear how well you're doing." Something cold settled in my stomach. What exactly does Jessica think about my business? Uncle Larry paused in his texting and looked up with an uncertain expression. "She's been worried about you, honestly. Your parents mentioned that consulting work was really stressful and uncertain, and Jessica has been feeling bad that you've been struggling so much." "Struggling so much," I repeated. "She mentioned last month that she wished there was something the family could do to help you get through the rough patch, he continued. Maybe connect you with some potential clients or something. I turned to stare at my parents with horror. You've had extended family members worried about my financial situation. We didn't say you were in financial trouble, Patricia said quickly. What exactly did you say? Before Patricia could answer, Uncle Larry's phone started buzzing with incoming text messages. He glanced at the screen and his face went pale. What is it? I asked. Jessica is asking why you didn't tell the family that your business was doing so well, he said slowly. She says everyone has been worried about you for months. My phone started buzzing too. I looked at the screen to see text messages coming in from a number I didn't immediately recognize. The first message read, Uncle Larry just told me about your business success. Why didn't you tell us you were doing so well? We've all been so worried. The second message said, This is Jessica, by the way. Got your number from Mom. I looked up at Uncle Larry. Jessica got my phone number from Patricia. Well, she's been wanting to reach out to you, he said defensively. She thought maybe you were too proud to ask for help with your business, and she wanted you to know the family was here for you. Too proud to ask for help, I said, my voice getting dangerously quiet. My phone buzzed again. This time, the message was longer. I feel terrible that we've all been talking about how to help you with your consulting business when you were already successful. Why didn't anyone know how well you were doing? Mom said at Easter that you were barely making ends meet and working crazy hours just to keep clients. I held up my phone so everyone in the room could see Jessica's message. Mom said at Easter that I was barely making ends meet. I asked Patricia. Patricia's face was turning red. I said you were working long hours and that consulting seemed stressful. You said I was barely making ends meet, I repeated, reading from Jessica's message. I may have mentioned that startup businesses can be financially uncertain, Patricia admitted reluctantly. My phone buzzed again, another message from Jessica. Also, why haven't you been coming to family events? Everyone misses you, but we all thought you were too stressed about work to take time for family stuff. I looked around the room at the faces of my immediate family members. Everyone misses me, but you all thought I was too stressed about work to take time for family. We didn't want to add pressure, Robert said defensively, by not telling me about family events. By not making you feel obligated to attend things when you were already overwhelmed with work stress, he clarified. Another text from Jessica. Uncle Larry says there's been some confusion about wedding invitations. Are you okay? Do you need to talk? I started typing a response to Jessica, but before I could finish, my phone rang. Jessica was calling. Answer it, Tyler said. She's probably worried about you now. I accepted the call and put it on speaker so everyone could hear. Oh, Candace. Jessica's voice came through clearly. I just heard from Uncle Larry that there was some mix-up about Tyler's wedding. Are you all right? I'm fine, I said carefully, but I'm learning some interesting things about family communication. I've been feeling so guilty, Jessica continued. We all talked at Easter about how we should be doing more to support you through your business struggles. But nobody wanted to hurt your pride by offering help you didn't ask for. I looked at my parents with growing fury. You discuss my supposed business struggles with extended family at Easter. It came up in conversation, Patricia said weakly. Jessica, I said into the phone, what exactly did my parents tell you about my consulting work? That you were working 16-hour days trying to get clients, and that the business was really unstable and stressful, Jessica replied immediately. Your mom mentioned that you probably couldn't afford to take time off for family events because you needed every billable hour you could get. Every billable hour I could get, I repeated. She said you were probably making less than you would at a regular job, but that you were determined to make entrepreneurship work even if it meant sacrificing family time and financial security, Jessica continued. I was staring at Patricia, who was now actively crying. Jessica, what else did the family discuss about me at Easter's? Well, we talked about how proud we are of you for taking risks and following your dreams. Jessica said, her voice getting more uncertain as she seemed to realize she was walking into something complicated. But also, how worried we are that you're isolating yourself because you're embarrassed about money problems. Embarrassed about money problems, I said very quietly. Your dad mentioned that you've always been too proud to ask for help, and that even as a kid, you preferred to struggle with things alone rather than admit you needed support, Jessica continued. I turned to look at Robert with complete disbelief. You told Jessica that I prefer to struggle alone rather than ask for help. That's how you've always been, Robert said defensively, independent to a fault. Jessica? I said into the phone, did anyone in the family mention that I've been sending my parents $2,000 every month for the past 3 years? The silence on the other end of the phone was telling. $2,000 a month, Jessica finally said. For 3 years. $72,000 total, I confirmed. But your parents said you were having money problems. My parents use my money to renovate their house and host family celebrations that I wasn't invited to, I said bluntly. Another silence from Jessica, followed by what sounded like her sitting down heavily in a chair. I need to understand this, she said slowly. You've been financially supporting Patricia and Robert while they've been telling everyone that you're struggling financially. That appears to be the situation. And you haven't been attending family events because you weren't told about them, not because you were too stressed about work to care. Correct. Oh my God, Jessica whispered. Candace, I am so sorry. We've all been feeling sorry for you and worrying about you when we should have been celebrating your success and including you in family gatherings. How many people knew about these supposed money problems? I asked. Everyone, Jessica admitted quietly. The whole family has been concerned about you. We've been having conversations about how to help without hurting your pride. I closed my eyes and tried to process the scope of what had been happening. My extended family had been worrying about financial problems I didn't have based on information from parents who were actually dependent on my financial support. They had been discussing my supposed isolation and pride issues while I was being systematically excluded from the very family gatherings they thought I was too stressed to attend. Jessica, when you say everyone, who exactly do you mean? All the aunts and uncles? All the cousins? Even some of the family friends who've known you since childhood, she said. We've been worried about you for months. But nobody called me directly to check how I was doing. What we thought that might make you feel worse, Jessica said quietly. Your parents said you were sensitive about the business struggles and that direct contact about work stress might embarrass you. So my parents had not only spread false information about my career and finances, they had also poisoned the well for direct family communication by suggesting that reaching out to me would be harmful rather than helpful. Jessica, I need to ask you something directly. Has anyone in the extended family been deliberately excluding me from events because they thought I was too good for family gatherings? Not too good, Jessica said quickly. Too stressed and too proud. We thought we were being considerate by not adding family obligations to your work pressure. So the family has been systematically avoiding inviting me to events because you all thought you were protecting me from additional stress. Yes, she admitted. We've been trying to give you space to focus on saving your business. The irony was devastating. My extended family had been conspiring to protect me from stress I wasn't experiencing based on false information about problems I didn't have provided by parents who were benefiting financially from the success they were describing as failure. And they had done it all out of love and concern for my well-being. Jessica was still on the phone and I could hear her talking to someone in the background. After a few moments, she came back to our conversation. Candace, I just talked to my mom and she's horrified, Jessica said. She wants to know if there's anything we can do to fix this situation. The situation is pretty complicated, I said, looking around the room at my immediate family members. But I think the first step is getting the truth about some things. We're all here for whatever you need, Jessica assured me. Actually, I have a question for Tyler, I said, turning to face my brother directly. Since we're all being honest now, I want to know something specific about your wedding. Tyler looked nervous. What about it? I want to know if my absence was really the result of a miscommunication or if it was intentional. The question hung in the air like smoke. Tyler looked at my parents, then at Stephanie, then back at me. His expression was wrestling with something uncomfortable. I don't understand what you mean, he said finally. I want to know if someone made a deliberate decision not to invite me to your wedding, regardless of the phone number mix-up in the group chat. Tyler's face went pale. Stephanie was staring at him with growing concern. Oh, Tyler, she said quietly, what is Candace asking? The silence stretched on until I couldn't stand it anymore. Tyler, did you ask our parents not to invite me to your wedding? It's not that simple, he said quietly. It's a yes or no question, I pressed. Stephanie's hand went to her mouth. Tyler, tell me you didn't deliberately exclude your sister from our wedding. Tyler stood up and started pacing around the living room, running his hands through his hair. When he finally stopped and turned to face us, his expression was defensive and guilty at the same time. I was worried about the attention, he said finally. What attention? Stephanie demanded. Candace always makes everything about herself, Tyler said, his voice getting stronger as he found his argument. Whenever she shows up to family events, suddenly everyone wants to hear about her business success and her exciting career. I didn't want my wedding day to turn into the Candace show. I felt like I had been slapped across the face. The Candace show. You know what I mean, Tyler continued. You walk into a room and within 10 minutes, everyone is asking about your latest business deals or your travel stories or whatever impressive thing you've accomplished lately. I wanted one day where the focus stayed on me and Stephanie. So you asked our parents not to invite me. Tyler looked at Stephanie apologetically. I asked them to handle the guest list in a way that kept the wedding focused on us as a couple. By excluding your sister, Stephanie's voice was getting louder. By avoiding family drama and distractions, Tyler corrected. I stared at my brother, trying to process what he had just admitted. He had deliberately arranged for me to be excluded from his wedding because he was worried that I might receive positive attention from family members. Tyler, I said very quietly, when have I ever made family events about myself? Every Christmas when you show up with expensive gifts that make everyone else's presents look cheap, he replied immediately. Every birthday when you organize elaborate surprises that nobody asked for. Every family gathering where you end up giving business advice to whoever will listen. I give thoughtful gifts because I care about people, I said, my voice shaking. I organize celebrations because I want them to be special. I share business advice when people ask for it. You do those things because you like being seen as successful and generous, Tyler shot back. Everything you do is designed to remind people how well you're doing compared to the rest of us. Stephanie was staring at Tyler with horror. Tyler, that's a terrible way to think about your sister. You don't know her like I do, he said defensively. She's always been competitive about achievements, always trying to prove she's smarter and more successful than everyone else. Or maybe, I said, my voice getting dangerous, I've been trying to share my success with my family because I love you and want you to benefit from what I've accomplished. By making the rest of us feel inadequate, by including you in my success, I exploded. Tyler, I've been sending our parents $2,000 every month so they could be financially comfortable. I've been giving expensive gifts because I wanted to share my good fortune with people I care about. I've been offering business advice because I thought it might help family members with their own careers. And all of that makes you look like the successful daughter while I look like the screw-up who works at a bank, Tyler said bitterly. The truth was finally coming out. Tyler's resentment wasn't about my supposed tendency to dominate conversations or seek attention. His resentment was about the fact that my career success made him feel insecure about his own achievements. Tyler. Stephanie said slowly, "Your sister's success doesn't diminish your accomplishments." "Doesn't it?" he replied. "When she walks into a room, she's the daughter who built a business from scratch and makes more money than the rest of us combined. I'm just the son who followed a traditional path and works for someone else." "You're the son who chose a stable career and built a happy marriage," I said. "There's nothing wrong with that path." "There's nothing impressive about it either," Tyler said. "Not compared to your path." I realized that Tyler had been carrying around insecurity about our different career choices for years, and instead of dealing with those feelings constructively, he had decided to exclude me from his wedding rather than risk being overshadowed on his special day. "Oh, so you asked our parents to make sure I didn't know about your wedding because you were worried I might receive compliments about my career." "I asked them to handle the situation so my wedding could be about me and Stephanie," he said stubbornly. "Tyler," Stephanie said, her voice now cold, "you deliberately excluded your sister from our wedding because you were jealous of her success." "I was protecting our special day," he corrected. "You were protecting your ego," she replied, "and you made me an unwilling participant in your family dysfunction." Tyler looked genuinely surprised by Stephanie's reaction. "I thought you would understand. You've met my family. You've seen how everyone reacts to Candace." "I've met your family," Stephanie agreed. "And what I've seen is people who care about each other. I haven't seen anyone being overshadowed or made to feel inadequate by Candace's success." "Because she hasn't been around for family events," Tyler said. "Because you've been systematically excluding her from family events," Stephanie corrected. The room fell silent as everyone processed what had just been revealed. Tyler had manipulated the guest list for his own wedding to protect himself from feeling insecure about his sister's achievements, and he had convinced our parents to participate in this exclusion by framing it as protection for his special day rather than management of his own jealousy. "Jessica," I said, realizing she was still on the phone, "did you hear all of that?" "I heard it," she said quietly, "and I'm horrified." "Tyler," I continued, turning back to my brother, "do you realize that your decision affected more than just the wedding? When you asked our parents to exclude me, you gave them permission to start excluding me from other family events too." "I never asked them to exclude you from other things," he said defensively. "You established the precedent that my presence was a problem that needed to be managed," I replied, "and they extended that logic to every family gathering since then." Tyler looked uncertain for the first time since his admission. "That wasn't my intention." "But it was the result," I said. "Your wedding exclusion became the model for excluding me from everything else." Stephanie was shaking her head in disbelief. "Tyler, this is not the man I thought I married." "I'm not a bad person," Tyler said desperately. "I just wanted one day that was about us." "You could have had a day that was about us while still including your sister," Stephanie replied. "Instead, you chose to have a day that was about protecting your insecurity at her expense." And there it was, the foundation of everything that had happened. Tyler's insecurity about our different levels of career success had led him to request that I be excluded from his wedding. Our parents had agreed to this exclusion and had then extended it to other family events while creating narratives that made my absence appear voluntary. The systematic exclusion I had discovered wasn't the result of miscommunication or assumptions about my priorities. It was the result of deliberate decisions made to protect Tyler's ego and our parents' comfort with family dynamics they understood. And I had been unknowingly funding this exclusion with my monthly financial contributions to the very people who were systematically writing me out of family life. The emotional weight of Tyler's admission was settling over the room when Robert's phone started buzzing insistently. He glanced at the screen and his face went white. "Who is it?" Patricia asked. "The bank," Robert said quietly, "probably about the equity line payment that's due tomorrow." Something cold settled in my stomach. What equity line payment? Robert and Patricia exchanged another one of their meaningful looks. but this time both of them looked panicked rather than merely uncomfortable. We may have mentioned that your contributions help with more than just general expenses, Robert said carefully. What exactly do you mean by that? Patricia started crying again, but these tears looked different from her earlier emotional display. These tears looked like fear. The house payments, she whispered. What house payments? I demanded. You own this house. You've owned it for 22 years. We took out a home equity loan, Robert admitted reluctantly, to fund the renovations. I felt the room starting to spin. How much of a home equity loan? $75,000, Patricia said through her tears. I did quick math in my head. A $75,000 home equity loan would require monthly payments of at least $800 to $1,000, depending on interest rates and terms. What are the monthly payments on that loan? $1,200, Robert said quietly. $1,200 a month, I repeated. Plus the regular property taxes and insurance, Patricia added, and your father's medication costs aren't fully covered by Medicare. How much are your total monthly expenses? I asked, though I was beginning to understand the scope of the problem. Robert pulled out his phone and opened what appeared to be a budgeting app. His hands were shaking as he scrolled through the numbers. Property taxes are $450 per month, he read. Insurance is $300. The equity loan is $1,200. Medication costs are usually around $250. Utilities average $300. Groceries and basic household expenses are maybe $400. I added the numbers in my head. That's $3,400 in essential monthly expenses. Plus car maintenance and repairs, Patricia added weakly, and occasional medical expenses that aren't covered. What's your monthly income from Dad's pension and Social Security? Robert looked like he wanted to disappear. $1,800 total. The math was devastating. My parents had monthly expenses of at least $3,400 and monthly income of $1,800. They had a monthly shortfall of $1,600 minimum, which meant they were completely dependent on my $2,000 monthly contributions, not just for comfort, but for basic survival. You're telling me that without my monthly payments, you can't afford to keep the house? We didn't plan it this way, Patricia said desperately. The renovations were supposed to increase the home value enough to justify the loan payments. But you can't make the loan payments without my money, I said. We thought your contributions would continue, Robert admitted. You've been so reliable with them. I stared at my parents, finally understanding the full scope of our relationship. They weren't just accepting my financial help gratefully while excluding me from family life. They were completely dependent on my financial support for their basic housing and living expenses while simultaneously undermining my reputation and excluding me from family celebrations. How long have you known that you couldn't afford your monthly expenses without my contributions? I asked. Since we took out the equity loan, Robert said quietly. But we thought it was a temporary situation until your father's pension increased or we found other income sources. That was 3 years ago, I pointed out. The time went by faster than we expected, Patricia said weakly. Tyler was staring at our parents with growing horror. You've been completely dependent on Candace's money for 3 years. It's not complete dependence, Robert protested. We cover half our expenses ourselves. You cover half your expenses, Tyler repeated. What happens if Candace stops sending money? The silence that followed was more telling than any answer could have been. We'd have to sell the house, Patricia finally admitted, and move where Tyler pressed. We'd figure something out, she said, but her voice lacked any conviction. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, scrolling through 3 years of monthly transfers to my parents' account. Each transaction was labeled family support because that's how I had conceptualized the money. I was supporting my family's comfort and security, not subsidizing their complete lifestyle. You realize, I said slowly, that I've been sending this money under completely false pretenses. How so? Robert asked defensively. You told me you needed help with rising costs and wanted to maintain your independence, I replied. You never mentioned that you had taken out a loan you couldn't afford and were completely dependent on my income to avoid losing your home. We didn't want you to feel obligated, Patricia said. You didn't want me to understand the true scope of your financial situation, because then I might have made different decisions about how much support to provide and under what conditions, I corrected. Tyler was looking back and forth between our parents and me with an expression of dawning realization. Wait, he said, if you can't afford the house payments without Candace's money, how could you afford to host my wedding here? Robert's face went even paler. We used some of the equity loan money for wedding expenses. How much of the equity loan money? Tyler demanded. About $15,000, Patricia admitted reluctantly. I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. You borrowed $15,000 against your home to pay for Tyler's wedding. It was a special occasion, Robert said defensively. A special occasion that I wasn't invited to funded by debt you can't afford without my financial support, I said. Tyler was staring at our parents with complete disbelief. You went into debt to pay for my wedding. We wanted to give you a beautiful celebration, Patricia said through fresh tears. You gave Tyler a beautiful celebration using borrowed money that requires my income to repay, I clarified. The scope of the financial manipulation was becoming clear. My parents had not only excluded me from Tyler's wedding, they had used debt to fund that wedding debt that required my ongoing financial support to service. They had literally used my money to pay for a celebration I wasn't allowed to attend. Does this mean, Tyler said slowly, that Candace is essentially paying for my wedding? Your sister's contributions help with many family expenses, Robert said evasively. That's not what I asked, Tyler replied firmly. I asked if Candace is paying for my wedding. The question hung in the air as everyone did the math. My monthly contributions were covering the loan payments that funded the wedding, which meant Tyler was correct in his assessment. Yes, I said quietly, I'm paying for your wedding, Tyler, the wedding I wasn't invited to because you were worried I might overshadow your special day. Tyler sat down heavily on the couch, putting his head in his hands. Stephanie was staring at all of us with complete horror. So let me make sure I understand this, she said. Tyler asked for Candace to be excluded from our wedding because he was insecure about her success. Your parents agreed to this exclusion while using Candace's money to fund the wedding celebration. And now the family is completely dependent on Candace's financial support for basic living expenses while she's been systematically excluded from family life. That's a very unfair characterization, Robert protested. Which part is unfair? Stephanie demanded. Robert opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again, as he realized he couldn't dispute any element of Stephanie's summary. My phone was buzzing with more messages from Jessica, who was apparently still listening to our conversation. Jessica, I said, are you getting all of this? Every word, she replied, her voice tight with anger. And I'm sharing it with the rest of the family because this is insane. Please don't, Patricia said quickly. This is private family business. This stopped being private when you involved the entire extended family in worrying about Candace's fake financial problems, Jessica replied sharply. Everyone deserves to know the truth about what's actually been happening. The room fell silent as the full scope of the situation settled over everyone. My family had created a perfect system of exploitation disguised as support and exclusion, disguised as respect for my priorities. They had used my money to fund the lifestyle and celebrations I was excluded from, while spreading false information about my success and creating narratives that justified my absence from family life. And they had done it so thoroughly that even Tyler's new wife believed she was marrying into a family where the sister was too career-obsessed and financially unstable to prioritize relationships. The worst part was that they had convinced themselves this arrangement was somehow considerate of my needs and respectful of my choices, when in reality it was a systematic exploitation of my love and financial generosity. The devastating reality of my family's complete financial dependence on my support was settling over the room like a toxic cloud. Everyone was staring at each other with varying degrees of shock, guilt, and panic, but I felt something else entirely. I felt a cold, crystalline clarity that I had never experienced before in my life. "I'm stopping the payments," I announced quietly. The reaction was immediate and electric. Patricia gasped as if I had physically struck her. Robert went completely white and reached for the arm of his chair as if he needed support to remain upright. Tyler's head snapped up from his hands, his eyes wide with alarm. "What do you mean stopping the payments?" Robert asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I mean, I'm not sending any more money," I said with deadly calm, effective immediately. "But the equity loan payment is due tomorrow," Patricia said desperately. $1,200. We don't have it." "Then you'll need to figure out how to get it from somewhere else." "Candace," Tyler said, standing up quickly, "you can't just cut them off without warning. They're depending on that money." I turned to look at my brother with something that must have resembled pity. "Tyler, they've been depending on that money while excluding me from family life for 3 years. They used my money to pay for your wedding, which you specifically asked them to make sure I couldn't attend. Exactly why should I continue funding that arrangement?" Tyler's mouth opened and closed several times before any words came out. "Because they're our parents and they need help." "They needed help," I corrected. "What they chose was deception and manipulation while taking advantage of my financial generosity." Patricia was crying so hard now that she could barely speak. "Please, Candace, we made mistakes, but we can't lose the house. This is the home where you and Tyler grew up. This is where all our memories are." "This is where your memories are," I replied. "I've apparently been systematically excluded from making new memories here for the past 3 years. Robert was pulling out his phone with shaking hands. "Let me call the bank," he said desperately. "Maybe we can arrange a payment extension or restructure the loan terms." "With what income?" I asked pointedly. "You just admitted that your monthly expenses exceed your monthly income by $1,600 minimum. No bank is going to restructure a loan for borrowers who can't demonstrate ability to repay." The panic in the room was escalating by the minute. Robert was frantically scrolling through his phone contacts, looking for someone who might be able to provide emergency financial assistance. Patricia was crying into a tissue while repeatedly saying, "I can't believe this is happening." Tyler was pacing around the room again, but this time his agitation looked different. Instead of defensive anger, he looked genuinely frightened. "Okay," he said, stopping in front of me with his hands raised in a gesture of surrender. "I was wrong about the wedding. I admit that. I was insecure and jealous, and I made a terrible decision. But Mom and Dad shouldn't lose their house because of my mistakes." "Mom and Dad shouldn't lose their house because of their own financial decisions," I corrected. "They chose to take out a loan they couldn't afford. They chose to spend $15,000 of that loan money on a wedding celebration. They chose to exclude me from family life while depending on my income to maintain their lifestyle." "But they're old," Tyler protested. "They don't have other options for housing or income." "They had the option of being honest with me about their financial situation from the beginning," I replied. "They had the option of including me in family life instead of creating elaborate justifications for excluding me. They had the option of treating me like a valued family member instead of just a source of income." Stephanie, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. "Tyler," she said firmly, "your sister has every right to be angry, and she has every right to stop supporting people who have been using her while excluding her." "But the house," Tyler said desperately. "The house was never actually affordable for your parents," Stephanie replied. "Candace's money was just postponing the inevitable financial reckoning." Meanwhile, Robert had apparently reached someone at the bank because I could hear him having an increasingly frantic conversation about payment options and extension possibilities. From what I could overhear, the conversation was not going well. They won't extend the payment deadline without a clear plan for bringing the loan current, he said after ending the call, and they want to see proof of income that can support the monthly payments going forward. How much do you have in savings? I asked. About $800, Patricia admitted quietly. Credit cards. Maxed out to pay for wedding expenses, Robert said. Other family members who might help. Patricia and Robert looked at each other with expressions of complete helplessness. Everyone thinks you're the one with financial problems, Patricia said with bitter irony. We've spent 3 years telling people that we're doing fine while you're struggling with your business. The perfect trap they had created for themselves was becoming apparent. They couldn't ask extended family for financial help because they had spent years maintaining the fiction that they were financially stable while I was the one having money troubles. Asking for help now would require admitting that they had been lying about their financial situation while accepting support from the daughter they had been describing as financially unstable. Jessica is still on the phone, I said, holding up my phone. Would you like to ask her for $1,200 for tomorrow's payment? Jessica doesn't have that kind of money, Robert said quickly. How do you know? I challenged. Maybe she's been building a successful career while you've been focused on my supposed business struggles. The truth was that I knew Jessica worked as a teacher and probably couldn't afford to provide emergency financial assistance to relatives, but I wanted to illustrate the impossibility of the situation my parents had created for themselves. Tyler was looking increasingly desperate. There has to be something we can do, some solution that doesn't involve mom and dad losing their home. There is a solution, I said calmly. I could continue sending the monthly support payments. Hope flickered across everyone's faces until I continued. But the terms would be completely different from now on. What terms? Robert asked warily. Thus, first, complete honesty about all family finances, including every debt, every expense, and every source of income. I said, second, inclusion in all family events with advance notice and genuine participation in planning. Third, correction of the false narrative you've spread about my business success to every person you've discussed it with. Those seem reasonable, Patricia said quickly. Fourth, I continued, Tyler publicly acknowledges his role in excluding me from the wedding and apologizes to Stephanie for making her an unwitting participant in family dysfunction. Tyler's face went red. You want me to humiliate myself? I want you to take responsibility for your actions and their consequences, I corrected, just like I'm taking responsibility for my decision to stop enabling this dysfunctional family dynamic. And if we agree to all of that, you'll continue the payments, Robert asked hopefully. I'll consider continuing the payments, I clarified, but the decision will be mine to make each month based on whether the family is actually meeting these conditions or just going through the motions to preserve their financial support. The room fell silent as everyone processed what I had just proposed. I was offering to continue supporting them financially, but only if they agreed to fundamental changes in how our family relationships operated. This feels like blackmail, Tyler said sullenly. This feels like establishing healthy boundaries, Stephanie corrected sharply. Your sister is offering to continue supporting a family that has been systematically excluding her. That's incredibly generous given what you've all done. It's not generous, Tyler protested. She's using financial leverage to force us to include her in family life. As opposed to you using emotional manipulation to exclude her from family life while she unknowingly funded that exclusion? Stephanie shot back. Tyler fell silent, apparently realizing that his position was indefensible. Patricia was looking around the room with growing desperation. How long do we have to decide? The loan payment is due tomorrow, I reminded her, so you have until tomorrow to decide whether you prefer these new terms or prefer to find alternative housing arrangements. 24 hours to completely restructure family relationships, Robert said with obvious frustration. 24 hours to decide whether you value having me as a family member more than you value maintaining the dysfunctional status quo, I corrected. The weight of the ultimatum was settling over everyone as they realized that I wasn't bluffing. I had the financial power to save their house or let them lose it, and I was prepared to use the power to demand fundamental changes in how they treated me. For the first time in my adult life, I was the one making demands, instead of simply accepting whatever terms my family offered for inclusion in their lives. And judging from the panic and desperation on their faces, they were finally beginning to understand that excluding me from family life while depending on my financial support had been a massive strategic error. They needed me more than I needed them, and they had just realized it at exactly the moment when I had decided I was done accepting their terms for our relationship. As my family sat in stunned silence, processing my ultimatum, I found myself thinking about other financial documents I had signed over the years. My father had always been meticulous about paperwork and had occasionally asked me to serve as an emergency contact or backup signature on various accounts and legal documents. "Dad," I said, interrupting the heavy silence, "what exactly did those papers you had me sign 3 years ago actually say?" Robert looked up from his phone with confusion. "What papers?" "When you set up the equity line of credit," I clarified, "you had me sign several documents that you said were just emergency contact information and backup authorization in case something happened to you or Mom." The color that had just returned to Robert's face immediately drained away again. "Those were just precautionary measures," he said carefully. "What kind of precautionary measures?" I pressed. Patricia and Robert exchanged another look, but this one was different from their previous guilty glances. This one looked like genuine fear. "You said they were emergency contact forms," I continued, "but I'm starting to think they might have been something more significant." I pulled out my phone and opened my credit monitoring app, something I checked regularly to ensure my business credit remained pristine for client purposes. I scrolled through the recent activity looking for anything that might be connected to my parents' financial accounts. What I found made my stomach drop. "See, Dad," I said very quietly, "why is your equity line of credit showing up on my credit report?" "Your credit report?" Tyler asked with alarm. I held up my phone so everyone could see the screen. There listed among my credit accounts was a home equity line of credit for $75,000 with my parents' address listed as the property location. "It shows me as a co-borrower," I said, my voice getting dangerously quiet. Robert looked like he wanted to disappear entirely. The bank required additional income verification to approve the loan amount we needed. "So you made me a co-borrower without telling me—" "We made you a co-signer," Patricia corrected weakly, as if that distinction mattered. "A co-signer who is legally responsible for the debt if you can't pay it," I said. Tyler was staring at our parents with horror. "You made Candace legally responsible for your loan without telling her—" "We didn't think it would ever be an issue," Robert said defensively. "We thought we could manage the payments." I was scrolling through more of my credit report with growing disbelief. What other accounts am I connected to that I don't know about? "Maybe we should discuss this privately," Patricia suggested nervously. "Maybe we should discuss this right now with everyone present," I countered. I opened my banking app and started checking for any accounts or authorizations I might have forgotten about. What I found was worse than I had imagined. "I'm listed as an authorized user on your primary checking account," I read from my phone. "I'm a co-owner on the savings account. I'm listed as a beneficiary and co-owner on your investment accounts." "Those were all for estate planning purposes," Robert said quickly. "Estate planning that makes me legally connected to accounts I didn't know existed," I replied. I continued scrolling and found something that made my blood run cold. "I'm listed as a co-owner on the deed to this house." The silence that followed was deafening. What do you mean, co-owner? Tyler asked in a whisper. I mean that according to my credit report and these financial documents, I legally own half of this house, I said, staring at my parents with complete disbelief. Robert was gripping the arms of his chair so tightly his knuckles were white. That was to protect the house from estate taxes when we die. That was to use my credit and income to secure loans you couldn't qualify for on your own, I corrected. The full scope of what my parents had done was becoming clear. They hadn't just been accepting my monthly financial support. They had used my identity credit and legal standing to secure financing and legal protections I had never agreed to. Do you realize, I said slowly, that as a co-owner of this house, I have legal rights to make decisions about the property? You would never exercise those rights, Patricia said desperately. How do you know what I would never do? I asked. You've spent 3 years systematically excluding me from family life while using my legal and financial identity to secure your lifestyle. I stood up and started walking around the room, my mind racing through the implications of what I had discovered. As a co-borrower on the equity line, I can contact the bank directly and discuss payment arrangements, I continued. As a co-owner of the house, I can demand an accounting of how my share of the property has been used. As an authorized user on your accounts, I can access financial records and transaction history. Tyler was looking back and forth between our parents and me with growing horror. How much legal control does Candace actually have over your finances? More than we intended to give her, Robert admitted quietly. I pulled out my phone and started making notes. I want to see every document I've ever signed that connects me to family accounts or property. I want copies of everything within 24 hours. You don't trust us, Patricia said with hurt in her voice. You use my legal identity to secure financing without my knowledge, while excluding me from the family life that financing was supposed to support, I replied. Trust is no longer relevant to this conversation. Stephanie was shaking her head in disbelief. Tyler, do you understand what your parents have done? They've made your sister legally responsible for debts she didn't know about and given her legal control over assets she didn't know she owned. It sounds like fraud, Tyler said quietly. It is fraud, I confirmed. Using someone's identity and credit to secure financing without their informed consent is financial fraud, even if that person is a family member. The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the legal implications of what had been revealed. My parents had not only been manipulating me emotionally and financially, they had been using my legal identity in ways that could potentially constitute criminal activity. What are you going to do? Robert asked fearfully. I'm going to exercise my legal rights as a co-owner and co-borrower, I said calmly, starting with demanding full financial disclosure and control over how my money and credit are being used. You could force the sale of the house, Patricia whispered. I could, I agreed. As a co-owner, I have the right to force a sale and split the proceeds. But you wouldn't, she said hopefully. I wouldn't do it maliciously, I clarified, but I would do it strategically if it became the best way to protect my own financial interests. Tyler was staring at me with something that looked like newfound respect mixed with fear. You really do hold all the cards, he said quietly. I hold legal and financial cards I didn't know I had until 5 minutes ago, I corrected. Cards your parents gave me while keeping me ignorant of their existence. I sat back down and looked around the room at my family members, feeling a strange sense of calm settling over me. Here's what's going to happen, I said. Tomorrow morning, I'm meeting with a lawyer to understand the full extent of my legal rights and obligations regarding these accounts and properties. I'm also meeting with an accountant to get a complete picture of the financial situation I've been unknowingly involved in. And then, Robert asked nervously, and then I'm going to decide how to use the legal leverage you've inadvertently given me to restructure this family's financial and emotional dynamics in ways that actually serve my interests for once. The shift in power dynamics was palpable. 5 minutes ago, my family had been panicking about losing their house because I was threatening to stop my monthly payments. Now they were panicking about losing their house because I had legal authority to make decisions about the property that they had given me without my knowledge. They had tried to create a system where they could benefit from my financial success while excluding me from family life. Instead, they had accidentally created a system where I had legal control over their most valuable assets while being completely free to make decisions based solely on my own interests. For the first time in this entire devastating conversation, I felt like I was the one with real power instead of just the one with money. And judging from the expressions on their faces, my family was beginning to understand that the legal leverage they had inadvertently given me was far more powerful than the financial leverage I had been unknowingly providing them. The room was thick with tension as my family processed the revelation that I had far more legal power over their financial situation than anyone had realized. I could see the wheels turning in their heads as they tried to figure out how to navigate this new reality where I held multiple forms of leverage they hadn't known they had given me. But as I sat there looking at their frightened faces, I realized that simply using my legal power to destroy them wouldn't actually give me what I wanted. What I wanted was genuine family relationships built on mutual respect and inclusion, not relationships based on fear of financial ruin. "I've made a decision," I announced. Everyone in the room tensed, clearly expecting me to deliver some kind of devastating ultimatum. "I'm not going to force the sale of the house," I said, "and I'm not going to immediately stop the monthly payments." The relief on my parents' faces was palpable, but I held up my hand before they could start thanking me. Instead, I'm implementing a new system that I'm calling a family inclusion audit. A what?" Tyler asked warily. A family inclusion audit," I repeated. "It's a monthly review process that ties my financial support to measurable evidence that I'm being treated as a valued family member instead of just a source of income." I pulled out my phone and opened a note-taking app where I had been organizing my thoughts while they processed the legal revelations. "Here's how it's going to work," I continued. "Every month I'll evaluate whether the family has met specific inclusion criteria. If the criteria are met, I'll continue the monthly payments. If they're not met, the payments stop immediately." "What criteria?" Patricia asked nervously. "First, advance notice of all family events, including informal gatherings, birthday celebrations, holiday plans, and any other occasion where family members are invited to participate," I said, reading from my notes. "I want at least 1 week's notice for small gatherings and 2 weeks' notice for major events." Robert was taking notes on the back of an envelope, apparently recognizing that he needed to track these requirements carefully. "Second, genuine inclusion in event planning," I continued. "Not just being told that something is happening, but being asked for input about dates, locations, menus, activities, and other logistics." "That seems reasonable," Stephanie said, shooting Tyler a meaningful look. A third correction of the false narrative about my business and financial situation with every person it was shared with, I said, "I want each family member to personally contact anyone they told about my supposed business struggles and set the record straight about my actual success." Tyler winced. "That's going to be embarrassing." "Not as embarrassing as having your sister pay for your wedding while you exclude her from attending," Stephanie said sharply. "Whoosh, fourth monthly family financial transparency meetings, where I review how my contributions are being used and approve major expenditures in advance." I continued. "You want to control how we spend money?" Robert asked with obvious discomfort. "Oh yeah, I want oversight of how my money is spent," I corrected. "If you want to use your own money for discretionary purchases, that's entirely your decision. But if you want to use my money, I get approval authority." Patricia was looking increasingly uncomfortable. "This feels very controlling." "This feels like establishing healthy boundaries around financial support," I replied. You've been accepting my money while excluding me from the family life that money was supporting. Now you can accept my money while including me in decisions about how it's used." "What's the fifth requirement?" Tyler asked reluctantly. "Monthly individual conversations with each family member to assess the genuine quality of our relationships," I said. "I want to spend one-on-one time with Mom, Dad, and Tyler each month to talk about how we're connecting and whether the inclusion efforts feel authentic or performative." I looked around the room at their faces, gauging their reactions to what I had outlined. "These requirements aren't punitive," I explained. "They're designed to rebuild genuine family relationships based on mutual respect and inclusion. If the family consistently meets these criteria for 6 months, we can revisit the system and potentially reduce the oversight." "And if we don't meet the criteria consistently?" Robert asked. "Then the financial support ends permanently, and I exercise my legal rights as co-owner and co-borrower to protect my own interests," I said simply. The weight of this new arrangement was settling over everyone as they realized that I was offering them a path to maintain their current lifestyle, but only if they genuinely committed to treating me as a valued family member. "There's one more element," I added. "Tyler needs to have an honest conversation with Stephanie about his role in excluding me from the wedding, and they need to decide together how to address the fact that their wedding celebration was funded by money from the person Tyler specifically asked to be excluded." Tyler looked at Stephanie with obvious anxiety. "We can talk about that privately." "Oh, we'll talk about it tonight," Stephanie confirmed, "and Tyler will take full responsibility for his decisions and their impact on our marriage." "What happens if we agree to this audit system?" Patricia asked. "Then tomorrow's loan payment gets made on time and we start the first month of the new arrangement," I said. "I'll transfer the usual $2,000, but from now on, that money comes with transparency requirements and inclusion expectations." "And what happens if we don't agree?" Robert asked. "Then you figure out how to make tomorrow's loan payment without my help," I replied, "and I meet with my lawyer about the best way to protect my interests as an unwilling co-borrower and co-owner." The choice I was offering was clear: accept genuine inclusion in family life with financial transparency, or lose both the financial support and the legal protections that my involvement had been providing. "How long do we have to decide?" Tyler asked. "Until tomorrow morning," I said. "The bank payment deadline doesn't change just because we're restructuring family relationships." I stood up and started gathering my things, preparing to leave them to discuss my proposal privately. "Where are you going?" Patricia asked with obvious anxiety. "I'm going to my hotel to give you time to discuss this as a family," I said. "You can call me tonight with your decision." "You're staying in a hotel?" she asked with hurt in her voice. "I'm staying in a hotel because this house hasn't felt like a welcoming family home to me for quite some time," I replied. "Whether that changes depends on your answer tomorrow." As I walked toward the door, Tyler called after me. "Candace," he said, his voice subdued, "for what it's worth, I'm sorry about the wedding. You were right that it was about my insecurity, and I was wrong to ask for you to be excluded." I turned around to face my brother, seeing something in his expression that looked like genuine remorse for the first time since this conversation had started. "Thank you for saying that, Tyler," I replied, "but an apology to me isn't enough. You need to apologize to Stephanie for making her an unwitting participant in family dysfunction, and you need to think seriously about whether you can handle having a sister who's successful without it threatening your sense of self-worth." "I can handle it," he said quickly. "We'll find out," I said. "That's exactly what this audit system is designed to test." I walked to my car feeling a strange combination of exhaustion and empowerment. For the first time in years, I had clearly articulated what I needed from my family relationships and established consequences for whether those needs were met. I had transformed my financial support from an unconditional gift into a tool for demanding genuine inclusion and respect, and I had discovered that I held far more legal leverage than I had ever imagined. Whether my family would choose authentic relationships over their comfort with excluding me remained to be seen. But for the first time, the choice was genuinely theirs to make with clear consequences either way. The ball was now in their court, but I was the one who had written the rules of the game. The phone call came at 7:30 the next morning, while I was drinking coffee in my hotel room and preparing for my meetings with a lawyer and accountant. "Candace." Tyler's voice sounded exhausted, as if he hadn't slept all night. "We accept your terms, all of them." I felt a mixture of relief and skepticism. All of them. "Dad's already called the bank to let them know the payment will be made today," Tyler continued, "and Mom's working on a list of everyone she needs to contact about correcting the narrative regarding your business." "What about the monthly audit requirements?" "We want to try it," Tyler said, though his voice lacked enthusiasm. "Stephanie helped us understand that your requirements aren't actually unreasonable. We should have been including you in family events all along." I made the bank transfer that morning, ensuring that my parents' loan payment would be made on time. But I also scheduled the legal and accounting consultations because I needed to understand the full scope of my rights and obligations, regardless of whether my family succeeded in meeting my inclusion requirements. The first test came 3 days later. My phone buzzed with a text message from Patricia. "Planning Dad's birthday celebration for next weekend. Would Saturday afternoon work for you? Thinking backyard barbecue with family. What do you think about a fishing theme since he just bought new equipment?" It was exactly the kind of advance notice and input request I had specified in my requirements, but it felt stilted and performative, as if she were checking items off a list, rather than genuinely wanting my involvement. I called her back instead of texting. "The fishing theme sounds perfect, I said. What can I contribute to the planning?" "Well, I was thinking maybe you could handle decorations," Patricia suggested tentatively. "I'd love to," I replied. "Should we coordinate on budget and color scheme? And do you want me to handle the fishing-themed cake as well?" The conversation that followed felt awkward, but genuine. Patricia seemed surprised by my enthusiasm for helping with decorations and grateful for my offer to manage the cake ordering. By the end of the call, we had established a division of responsibilities that actually utilized my organizational skills rather than just tolerating them. The birthday celebration itself was a revelation. For the first time in years, I felt like a genuine participant in a family event, rather than an outsider who had been reluctantly included. Robert seemed genuinely pleased with the fishing-themed decorations I had arranged, and several family members complimented the custom fishing cake I had ordered. But what struck me most was Tyler's behavior. Instead of acting threatened by positive attention I received for my contributions, he seemed relieved that someone else was helping to ensure the celebration was special for our father. "Thank you for handling all the decoration details," he said quietly while we were cleaning up afterward. "I never would have thought of half the things you did, and Dad loved every bit of it." "You're welcome," I replied, testing whether this represented genuine appreciation or strategic flattery. "Stephanie's been helping me understand something," Tyler continued. "She pointed out that when you organize things or contribute ideas, it's not about showing off. It's about caring enough to put in effort." "It's always been about caring," I confirmed. "I know that now," he said. "I'm sorry it took me so long to see it." The conversation felt genuine rather than calculated, which gave me hope that the audit system might actually be creating opportunities for authentic relationship repair, rather than just performative compliance. Week 2 brought another test when Aunt Dorothy called to invite the family to her granddaughter's piano recital. Instead of just assuming I wouldn't be interested or wouldn't be available, Patricia called me first to coordinate our response. "Dorothy's granddaughter is performing in a piano recital next Thursday evening," she explained. "The family usually attends these events together. Would you like to join us?" "I'd love to come," I said. "Should we carpool or do you want me to meet you there?" "Let's carpool," Patricia suggested. "It would be nice to have the drive time to catch up." The piano recital was exactly the kind of low-key family gathering I had been missing without realizing it. Nothing dramatic or elaborate, just extended family members supporting a child's musical development. But sitting in that auditorium with my parents and Tyler applauding for Dorothy's granddaughter felt like being welcomed back into a family community I had been excluded from. During the drive home, Patricia brought up the business's narrative correction project she had been working on. "I've contacted most of the people we discussed your business with," she said. "It's been embarrassing to admit that we misrepresented your success, but everyone has been very understanding." "How have people reacted to the truth about my business?" I asked. "They're impressed," she admitted. "Several people mentioned that they know business owners who might be interested in consulting services. I collected contact information if you're interested." "I'm definitely interested," I said, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the car's heating system. Week 3 brought the first monthly financial transparency meeting, which I had been dreading because I expected it to feel confrontational and controlling. Instead, it turned out to be surprisingly productive. Robert had prepared a detailed breakdown of how my previous month's contribution had been allocated loan payment, property taxes, insurance premiums, medical expenses, and basic household costs. He also presented a budget proposal for the upcoming month that included a small discretionary fund for entertainment and gifts. "The discretionary fund is for things like birthday presents and dinner out occasionally," he explained. "We wanted to be completely transparent about requesting money for non-essential expenses." "A discretionary fund makes perfect sense," I agreed, "and I appreciate you breaking down exactly how the money is being used." What surprised me was that the financial transparency actually made me more comfortable with providing support, not less. Knowing exactly how my money was being used eliminated the anxiety I had been feeling about potentially funding hidden expenses or undisclosed debt. Week 4 brought an unexpected challenge when Tyler called with news that Stephanie was pregnant. "We wanted to tell you before we told the rest of the family," he said, his voice filled with excitement and nervousness. "And we wanted to ask if you'd be interested in being involved in planning a small celebration." The request felt like a test of whether our new family dynamics could handle another major milestone without reverting to old patterns of exclusion and manipulation. "I would love to help plan a celebration," I said immediately, "and I'm so happy for both of you." "We were thinking maybe a small dinner party with both families," Tyler continued. "Nothing elaborate, just a nice way to share the news and celebrate together." The pregnancy announcement dinner, 2 weeks later, felt like a completely different experience from Tyler's wedding. I was involved in planning from the beginning, consulted about menu choices and decoration ideas, and included in all the coordination calls with Stephanie's family. More importantly, Tyler seemed genuinely excited to have me participate, rather than worried about being overshadowed. When several guests asked about my business during dinner, Tyler actually contributed to those conversations by sharing details about my recent contract wins and expansion plans. "Candace just landed a contract with a federal agency," he told Stephanie's parents with obvious pride. "She's going to be advising them on efficiency improvements for their procurement processes." The moment felt like a breakthrough. Tyler was not only tolerating positive attention for my achievements, he was actively highlighting them and expressing pride in my success. But the real test came at the end of the month when I received a text message from Jessica: "Family beach weekend at the coast next month. All the cousins and their families. Are you interested in joining us?" The message felt natural and inclusive, as if I had never been excluded from family gatherings. But I realized that this was exactly what genuine inclusion was supposed to feel like: effortless and automatic, rather than forced and calculated. As I reviewed the month's progress, I felt cautiously optimistic about the changes in family dynamics. The audit system seemed to be creating space for authentic relationship repair rather than just surface-level compliance with my requirements. But I also recognized that 1 month of improved behavior didn't erase 3 years of systematic exclusion. The real test would be whether these changes could be sustained over time, or whether my family would revert to old patterns once the immediate financial pressure decreased. The monthly individual conversations I had scheduled with each family member would help me evaluate the sustainability of these improvements and determine whether we were building genuine relationships or just maintaining a more sophisticated form of manipulation. Either way, I was finally being treated like a valued family member rather than a convenient funding source, which felt like progress worth continuing to invest in. Exactly 1 month after I had implemented the family inclusion audit system, my phone rang while I was reviewing quarterly client reports in my home office. I glanced at the caller ID and saw my father's name, which immediately set off alarm bells because our scheduled monthly conversation wasn't for another week. "Hi, Dad," I answered, already feeling tension building in my chest. "Candace." Robert's voice sounded strained and urgent. "We need to talk about the contractor payments for the bathroom renovation." I felt my stomach drop. "What bathroom renovation? The one we started last week," he said, as if I should obviously know about it. "The contractor needs his progress payment by tomorrow, and we're short about $1,500. I closed my laptop and gave Robert my full attention, because this conversation felt like it was about to reveal whether the past month of improved family dynamics had been genuine or performative. "Dad, when did you decide to start a bathroom renovation?" "Last week," he repeated impatiently. "The toilet in the main bathroom started leaking, and when the plumber came out, he found water damage in the subflooring. We had to go ahead with a full renovation to fix the structural problems." "Zub, and you didn't think to discuss this with me before starting a renovation that you apparently can't afford to complete?" "It was an emergency," Robert said defensively. "We couldn't wait for the next scheduled financial meeting." Something in his tone was bothering me, but I couldn't put my finger on exactly what it was. "Let me understand the timeline here. You discovered water damage last week, hired a contractor to do a full bathroom renovation, and now you need $1,500 for a progress payment. Is that correct?" "And Nariaish Siege." "That's correct." "And at what point in this process did you plan to involve me in the decision-making?" "We're involving you now," Robert said with obvious irritation. I felt anger starting to build in my chest, but I forced myself to stay calm while I gathered more information. "Dad, what was the total estimated cost for this renovation project?" "About $6,000, he admitted reluctantly. $6,000 that you agreed to spend without consulting me, even though you can't afford to pay for it without my financial support. Like I said, it was an emergency." Something about this conversation was feeling increasingly familiar, and not in a good way. I had a growing suspicion that I was about to discover that my family had learned nothing from our confrontation a month ago. "Dad, let me ask you something else. Has the family been planning Mom's birthday celebration?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. "Her birthday isn't until next month," he said carefully. "That's why I'm asking if you've been planning it," I replied. "According to our agreement, I should be involved in planning family events with advance notice." Another pause longer this time. "We've had some preliminary discussions," Robert finally admitted. "Preliminary discussions that I wasn't included in. We were going to bring you into the planning once we had some initial ideas worked out." I felt the same cold clarity I had experienced during our confrontation a month earlier. My family was reverting to their old patterns of excluding me from decisions and events while expecting my continued financial support. "Dad, what initial ideas have you worked out for Mom's birthday?" "Well, we thought maybe a nice dinner at that new restaurant downtown," he said evasively. "Which restaurant? What date? How many people? What's the budget?" "We haven't finalized those details yet." I pulled up my calendar and started taking notes because I suspected I was going to need a record of this conversation. "Dad, I'm going to ask you a direct question and I want a direct answer. Have you, Mom, and Tyler been planning Mom's birthday celebration without involving me? The silence that followed was answer enough. Yes, he finally admitted, but we were going to include you once we had the basic framework established. The basic framework, I repeated. You mean once you had made all the important decisions and just needed me to show up and help pay for whatever you had already planned? That's not fair, Robert protested. What's not fair is that exactly 1 month after I explicitly outlined requirements for being included in family planning, you've already reverted to excluding me from decisions while expecting my financial support. I could hear conversation in the background on his end of the call, and I realized that other family members were present and probably listening to our conversation. Dad, who else is there with you right now? Your mother and Tyler, he admitted. Put me on speakerphone, I instructed. I want everyone to hear this conversation. Candace. Patricia's voice came through, clearly confirming that I was now on speaker. We're sorry about not involving you in the birthday planning yet. We were going to call you this weekend. After you had already made all the decisions, I said. We just wanted to have some ideas to propose to you, Tyler added. Oh, Tyler, let me ask you something directly, I said. Do you remember the conversation we had exactly 1 month ago about my requirements for continued financial support? Of course I remember. Do you remember the part about being included in event planning from the beginning, not just being told about decisions after they've been made? Yes, but there is no but, I interrupted. Either you include me in planning from the beginning, or you don't. Either you treat me like a valued family member whose input matters, or you treat me like a funding source who gets informed about your decisions after the fact. The silence on the other end of the call was telling. And Dad, do you remember the part about major expenditures being approved in advance? This was an emergency, Robert said defensively. A near $6,000 renovation is not an emergency response to a leaking toilet, I replied. A $6,000 renovation is a discretionary home improvement project that requires advanced consultation with the person whose money you're planning to use. I could hear hushed conversation happening in the background, as if my family members were conferring with each other while I waited on the line. Candace, Patricia said finally, we understand that we made mistakes. Can we schedule a family meeting this weekend to discuss the bathroom renovation and get your input on the birthday planning? No, I said simply. No, Tyler's voice sounded surprised. No. You had a month to demonstrate that you could honor our agreement about inclusion and transparency. Instead, you've spent that month reverting to exactly the same patterns of exclusion and financial manipulation that caused our confrontation in the first place. But we did include you in some things, Patricia protested. The fishing party for your father's birthday, the piano recital, the pregnancy announcement dinner. You included me in events where you needed my help with planning and execution, I corrected. But when it came to making financial decisions and planning events, where you didn't need my organizational skills, you immediately excluded me again. The truth of my assessment seemed to be settling over them, because the background conversation had stopped entirely. So what does this mean? Robert asked quietly. It means you failed the audit, I said. You demonstrated that the improvements in family dynamics were performative rather than genuine. You were willing to include me when it served your interests, but you defaulted back to exclusion as soon as you thought you could get away with it. We can do better, Tyler said desperately. I'm sure you can, I agreed, but you've already proven that you won't do better without external pressure forcing you to change. I took a deep breath and delivered the response I had been preparing for exactly this scenario. The bathroom renovation contractor can wait for his progress payment, I continued, because I'm not providing any additional financial support until you find a way to fund current projects without my help. But the contractor expects payment tomorrow, Robert said with obvious panic. Then you'll need to explain to the contractor that the project funding has fallen through, I replied. And Mom's birthday celebration, Patricia asked in a small voice. You'll need to plan something you can afford with your own money, I said, just like the bathroom renovation. The silence that followed felt different from the previous pauses in our conversation. This silence felt like the family was finally understanding that I had been serious about the consequences for failing to meet my inclusion requirements. Candace, Tyler said finally, please don't do this. We can fix the problems with planning and communication. You had a month to fix those problems, I replied. Instead, you spent a month proving that you would only include me when it directly benefited you. And then I delivered the line I had been waiting a month to use, the perfect parallel to the casual cruelty they had shown me when I discovered Tyler's wedding. Didn't I tell you, I said quietly, I told you exactly what would happen if you failed to meet the inclusion requirements. I told you exactly what the consequences would be. Didn't I tell you that? The silence that followed was complete and devastating. My family was finally experiencing the same confusion and helplessness I had felt when they casually asked, "Didn't we tell you?" about Tyler's wedding, as if excluding me from my brother's most important day was a minor oversight that shouldn't have surprised me. Now they were the ones being asked, "Didn't I tell you?" about consequences they should have seen coming, but had somehow convinced themselves wouldn't actually materialize. What do we need to do to fix this? Patricia asked desperately. You need to figure out how to fund your current financial commitments without my help, I said. And then you need to decide whether you actually want me as a family member or just as a source of income you can manipulate. I ended the call feeling a mixture of sadness and satisfaction. I was sad that my family had chosen to revert to their old patterns of exclusion and manipulation, but I was satisfied that I had followed through on my commitments and consequences rather than allowing myself to be drawn back into the dysfunctional dynamic they preferred. For the first time in my adult life, I had said what I meant and meant what I said when it came to my family relationships. And now they would have to live with the consequences of underestimating my resolve. 3 hours after I hung up on my family, my phone started buzzing with panicked text messages and voicemails. Tyler left 4 separate messages begging me to reconsider. Patricia sent a series of increasingly desperate texts explaining how they could change their communication patterns. Robert called twice to discuss alternative payment arrangements for the contractor. I ignored all of it. Instead, I spent the evening reviewing the legal documents my attorney had prepared regarding my co-ownership status and financial obligations. I also researched local contractors to understand typical payment schedules for bathroom renovation projects. What I learned was illuminating. The next morning, I called the contractor directly. "This is Candace Mitchell," I said when he answered. "I understand you're working on a bathroom renovation at my parents' house on Elm Street." "Yes, ma'am," he replied. "Great project. Should be finished by the end of next week." "I'm calling because there seems to be some confusion about payment scheduling," I continued. As a co-owner of the property, I wanted to clarify the financial arrangements for this project. Co-owner. The contractor sounded puzzled. The work was authorized by Robert and Patricia Mitchell. They said they were the homeowners. They are homeowners, I confirmed, but I'm also a legal co-owner and I wasn't consulted about this project. Can you tell me what the payment schedule looks like? Well, we typically do 50% upfront, 40% at substantial completion, and 10% final payment after walkthrough, he explained. They paid the upfront portion and were expecting the substantial completion payment today. How much was the upfront payment? I asked. $3,000. I felt my eyebrows go up. My parents had somehow found $3,000 for the initial payment, but needed $1,500 from me for the second installment. That suggested they had liquidated something to fund the project start, but couldn't sustain the payments without my help. And the substantial completion payment is how much? $2,400. 2,400, I repeated, not 1,500. No, ma'am, definitely 2,400. Is there a problem with payment? I realized my parents had lied to me about the amount needed, probably hoping they could get 1,500 from me and cover the remaining 900 from some other source. Even in their desperate phone call, they were still trying to manipulate me. There may be a payment delay, I said carefully. As co-owner of the property, I need to review the project scope and budget before authorizing further payments. I see, the contractor said with obvious concern. Should I stop work until this gets resolved? That would be prudent. I agreed. I'll be in touch within the next few days about how to proceed. After ending the call with the contractor, I spent the rest of the morning implementing the next phase of my plan. First, I contacted my bank to establish a separate savings account specifically for family-related financial management. I transferred $50,000 into this account money that would be available for genuine family emergencies, but completely separate from my business and personal finances. Second, I called my attorney to begin the process of legally formalizing my co-ownership rights and establishing clear boundaries around future financial obligations related to my parents' property. Third, I scheduled appointments with both a financial planner and an estate planning attorney to ensure that my involvement in family finances was structured to protect my interests rather than leaving me vulnerable to future manipulation. By noon, I had created a comprehensive structure for managing family financial relationships that protected me while preserving the option to provide support under clearly defined circumstances. Then I called Jessica. I need to tell you what's been happening with the family financial situation, I said when she answered, and I need your help with something. I spent an hour explaining the bathroom renovation fiasco and my decision to suspend financial support until my family demonstrated genuine commitment to inclusion, rather than just performative compliance with my requirements. Good for you, Jessica said immediately. What they did with the bathroom renovation proves they haven't learned anything from the wedding situation. I'm implementing permanent changes to how family finances work, I continued, but I want to make sure that Patricia's birthday celebration still happens, just not with their current dysfunctional planning process. What do you have in mind? I want you to organize a family birthday celebration for Patricia, I said. Something nice, but not elaborate. I'll fund it through you, and I'll attend as a guest rather than an organizer or financial contributor. That's brilliant, Jessica said immediately. It shows that you care about celebrating family milestones, but you're not enabling their financial manipulation. Exactly. Can you handle coordinating with the extended family and organizing something appropriate and war a wand was on with contents? Absolutely. What's the budget? Whatever you think is reasonable for a nice family dinner with cake and presents, I said. Just keep the receipts and I'll reimburse you afterward. This is going to be very educational for Patricia and Robert, Jessica said with obvious satisfaction. They're going to see that family celebrations can happen without their manipulation and control. That evening, Patricia called me in tears. The contractor stopped working today, she said. He said you told him to stop until payment issues were resolved. The contractor stopped working because you can't afford to pay him, I corrected. I just clarified the legal ownership situation so he understood the complexity of authorizing payments. But the bathroom is half finished, she protested. We can't use it until the work is completed. Then you should have made sure you could afford to complete the project before starting it, I replied. Please, Candace, we'll do anything you want regarding family planning and inclusion. We understand now that we made mistakes. You understand that you got caught making the same mistakes again, I said. That's different from understanding why those mistakes are problematic. We can learn, Patricia insisted. Give us another chance. You had your chance, I said gently but firmly. You used it to prove that you'll only include me when it directly serves your interests. What about my birthday? She asked in a small voice. Your birthday will be celebrated, I assured her. Jessica is organizing a family dinner for you. I'll be there as a guest. But I want you to help plan it, Patricia said. I want you to be involved. You wanted Tyler's wedding to happen without me, I reminded her. You wanted your bathroom renovation to be decided without me. You wanted the birthday planning to be done without me. You can't selectively want my involvement only when you need my money or organizational skills. The silence that followed felt heavy with the weight of everything that had been broken in our family relationships. What do we need to do to earn back your financial support? Patricia finally asked. You need to demonstrate that you value me as a family member when you don't need anything from me, I said. You need to show that you can maintain inclusive, respectful relationships during ordinary times, not just when you're in financial crisis. How long will that take? However long it takes, I said. Maybe 6 months, maybe 2 years. Maybe never if you're not actually capable of treating me with consistent respect. But we can't afford the house payments without your help, she said desperately. Though then maybe you can't afford the house, I replied. That's a possibility you should have considered before taking out loans you couldn't repay and excluding me from family life while depending on my financial support. 6 months later, my parents had sold their house and moved to a smaller home they could afford on their actual income. The transition was difficult, but it forced them to confront the reality of their financial situation instead of relying on my subsidies to maintain an unsustainable lifestyle. Tyler and Stephanie bought a modest home they could afford on Tyler's salary, and Tyler began working on addressing his insecurities about our different career paths through individual therapy. The extended family rallied around during the transition period, providing both emotional and practical support as my parents downsized and reorganized their finances. Family gatherings began happening at different locations, and the responsibility for organizing celebrations became shared among multiple family members. Most importantly, the family gradually learned to include me in planning and decision-making, not because they needed my money, but because they genuinely wanted my participation in family life. Patricia's birthday dinner organized by Jessica was lovely and intimate. The bathroom renovation at their old house was completed using proceeds from the home sale. Tyler's insecurity about my career success transformed into genuine pride in my accomplishments. And I learned something crucial about the difference between being needed and being valued. For years, I had confused being needed for money with being valued as a person. My family had needed my financial contributions, but they hadn't valued my presence in their lives. Forcing them to find alternative solutions to their financial problems created space for them to discover whether they actually wanted relationships with me beyond my ability to fund their lifestyle. It turned out they did want genuine relationships, but only after they were forced to confront the difference between loving someone for what they provide and loving them for who they are. The most satisfying moment came a year later at Tyler's baby shower when he stood up to give a toast. I want to thank my sister Candace, he said, for teaching our family the difference between being supported and being valued, for teaching us that real love includes people in your life, not just in your bank account. As I looked around the room at family members who had learned to celebrate my presence rather than just appreciate my contributions, I realized that fighting back hadn't meant destroying my family relationships. Fighting back had meant demanding better family relationships. And sometimes, the best way to show love for people is to refuse to enable their worst impulses, even when that refusal comes with painful consequences. Have you ever been in a situation where family members took your generosity for granted while excluding you from their lives? How do you think you would handle discovering that your financial support was being used to fund celebrations you weren't invited to? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe for more stories about setting boundaries with family members who mistake your kindness for weakness. Share this with anyone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, because sometimes we all need reminders that we deserve to be valued, not just needed. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you have the right to expect genuine respect and inclusion from the people you choose to support. Don't let anyone convince you that your love should be one sided or that your generosity should come without basic human dignity in return.